everybody, Claire here. So here we go again. This is my series that I call Spread the Light, and it's about propagating and just really talking about how to harness the invisible laws of creation, and how in doing so we empower ourselves to live more fulfilling lives, and not only that, but as we live more fulfilling lives and as we align with purpose by understanding how these invisible laws function and how we are a part of them, when we align with our own purpose, we become a source of light in the world and inspiration to other people. And this is one of the most beautiful ways that we can serve other people, is actually by being in our own purpose. So that's really the reason that I'm offering this series, and also to give you free support during challenging times, and so that you can understand that you don't have to collapse to the lowest common denominator of experience. You can elevate yourself, and you have everything it takes to be able to elevate yourself. So this week, right now, I'm doing installments on the different laws of the universe. And so this week we're going to look at the law of non-resistance. But before we move on to that, last week we talked about the law of increase, and this idea that what we praise increases, basically. So what we pay attention to grows, because the universe is infinite abundance. And whatever we pay attention to, it amplifies for us. So this gives us a clue that we want to train our thinking so that we're paying attention to what we actually want to create, and not paying attention to what we don't want in life. The truth is that many of us use our imagination improperly, really. We use our imagination to torture ourselves and to anticipate terrible things that could happen. And the more we place our attention on that stuff, obviously, the more we potentially grow it in our experience, depending on the amount of time we spend concentrating on that and the intensity of emotion that's associated with it. So this is how I seek to support you in training your mind so that you can conceive of and bring into being the possibilities from the unknown that are in alignment with your higher purpose, because you have one, and everyone has one. So we looked at the law of increase and this idea that what we praise increases, and how praise changes our perspective of other people, of our circumstances, of ourselves, when we choose to stop focusing on what's missing, or what isn't going well, or what we don't like about a situation or a person or ourselves, and instead decide to praise everything that we can, how that amplifies the good in our experience and the good that we're able to receive. Actually, praise changes our physiology, because it changes our pattern of vibration. And this physiology, this physical consciousness, is determined by the vibration that we have on the quantum level. It influences our physical consciousness. And praise finally changes our present circumstances, because in the moment where we, instead of looking at what's not good or what's missing, in the moment where we choose to praise our current circumstances with gratitude or some other action of increase, we actually move to a higher level of being, and where there are more possibilities, more abundance, more ideas, more creativity, more of everything, really, that we're looking for, more of our own good. So that's how the law of increase works. So it's praise, and what you've got implicit in the word praise is the word raise. So it lifts up everything. So that's how praise works in conjunction with the law of increase. So if you listened to this last week, and you had a thought during the week about how you could praise, or ask in situations what could be praised, or what was the good in this, and you noticed a difference. See, you guys, this stuff only works if you use it. It only works if you practice it. And that's why each week I give you a little task that something you can pay attention to during your week. And so if you're starting to notice things and starting to do things, and if you've noticed how the law of increase functioned in your life in a particular way, go ahead and chat it in the comments, or send me a message personally, because I always love to hear from you. And this stuff only works if you use it, if you integrate it into your life. And then things get really exciting. So, this week we're going to talk about the law of non-resistance. The law of non-resistance basically can be summed up with the phrase, what we resist persists. Why is that? Well, because what we're paying attention to, as I was just saying, whatever we place our attention on gets amplified. When we're in resistance to something, even though we may think of it as something that we don't want and we're resisting it, we're attached to it. There's a line of energy going out to it, and it's actually consuming our energy, right? So because that is part of our field and because we're paying attention to it, it grows. That's why what we resist persists. So the law of non-resistance, how to apply that in life? Well, we're going to look at a few things. One is to stop resisting and start focusing on what you want to create. One is refusing to argue, and we'll talk about why that's important. One is finding ways to allow prosperity to flow easily in your life and how that's connected to the law of non-resistance. And finally, loving your enemies, sacred friends, and what that has to do with the law of non-resistance. So, the core principle here, again, is that what we resist persists. So, resistance is not in accord with that which we are seeking. Because we're always in resistance to something that we feel that we don't want or that we're afraid of. And the more we spend time focusing on that, the more there is going to be a tendency to manifest that energy in some form in your life, through other people, through situations, right? Because everything in this reality is a reflection. It's a reflection of the energy that we hold in our being. And it's showing us the energy that we hold in our being. So if you want to know what you're vibrating, just look at the results in your life. And it will give you a pretty good idea of where things are going well and you're aligned and you're in harmony, and where things are not going as well as you would like them to go. Okay? So, think about this. Resistance not in accord with what we're seeking. The war on drugs was not successful. The war on terror is not successful. Why? Because anytime you're at war with something, you are attached to it in resistance. You can't resist something and expect it to go away. Anytime you hear that there's a war on anything, a war on cancer, a war on whatever it is, you can be sure that that is not going to have a successful outcome. It's not in resisting something that we solve the problem. In fact, we only amplify it and cause it to become more entrenched. So think about ways in your own life where you're struggling with something or you're at war with something. That is a strong attachment, and it will amplify that energy in your experience. So instead, what do? We focus on what we really want to create. None of us wants to create terror. None of us wants to create disease. But we spend so much time focused on that kind of thing that we grow it in our experience. So instead, let's take our attention off of that, starve that of our attention, and instead focus on the life-giving and beautiful and wonderful things that we want to create. It's as simple as that. And every time we find our minds going back to, yeah, well, but what about, it's a practice. It's a practice, you guys. It's just something that you learn to do over and over again. I'm feeling a sense of contraction in my energy right now. That must mean, what am I thinking about, right? So you're responding in some way to what your thoughts are. Even if your thoughts are unconscious, right? They're just on a loop. If you start feeling a contraction in your energy field, trace it back to, well, what was I just thinking about that made me feel like, I got smaller or powerless or helpless somehow or not good inside. You can trace it back to your thought, right? So focus on what you do want to create, what you would love by listening to your longing, by listening to your discontent, and let your attention be absorbed. Obsess about that instead of obsessing about the things that you're afraid of and don't want to have happen, because that's a sure way to bring them into your experience. So water shows us the way of non-resistance, right? Water can do anything. Water can overcome anything. And over billions of years, it wears down rock, right? It carves. And so water doesn't attack. Water just flows, right? And we can do the same thing. We can flow. If we go through life fighting and opposing and resisting and arguing, we're bound to meet that same energy in our own lives. So we can be more like water, we can be non-resistant, we can flow and stay focused on what we want to create. And when we're focused on what we want to create, we're so inspired by that energy that we find ourselves less and less in an energy of resistance and fighting and struggle and opposing. So this is a really key thing. Stop resisting. So this is how we apply the law of non-resistance in our lives. To stop resisting and to focus on what you want to create. Mother Teresa once said, I will never go to a rally against a war, but if you hold a rally for peace, I'll be there. It makes so much sense, but she's saying exactly that. She's saying, I don't want to focus on what I don't want to create. I'm not focusing on war. If you want to focus on peace, I'll be there. Yes, let's create peace. And you don't create peace by focusing on war. You don't create peace by fighting and opposing and rallying and stirring up the energy of anger. That's not how you create peace. There's no anger in peace. So instead of resisting, focus on what you want to create. So ask yourself, what am I resisting? How can I change my focus to the things I want to create? So one of the ways that we can apply this law is by, number one, refusing to argue. Nothing worthwhile or lasting is ever gained by argument, because if you convince a person against their will, that person will be of the same opinion under the surface. You can't beat somebody into submission to make them think the way you want them to think, or to come around to your way of thinking. There's no point. You know, the only way to change things, really change anybody or anything, is requires a change in consciousness. It's not by convincing somebody on the intellectual level that you will change anything. Their consciousness has to change. Your consciousness has to change. Our consciousness as a humanity has to change if we're going to change the way things are on this planet. It doesn't come by arguing about it or by trying to, bring people over to a certain point of view. It happens inwardly from a change of consciousness. And, any place, right is right, no matter what. Truth is truth, no matter what. It doesn't need you to defend it. It's always been true, and it will always be true. It doesn't need you to defend it. So don't waste your energy arguing, and don't allow yourself to be pulled down into a lower vibration that only contributes to the chaos and the disorder and the lack of harmony that's already present. Refuse to argue. So ask yourself, in life right now, where could I apply this principle? When I'm tempted to argue because I want to be right, because I'm right and I know I'm right and I want to be right, that's just ego. That's just ego. You don't need to do that. You can just let it roll off you. Flow like water. It's okay. If you're right, you're right. You don't have to prove it. Just stay focused on what you want to create. So, this is related to how we find ways to allow prosperity to come to us. If we're in resistance, it's really hard to receive, right? And we can only allow prosperity in all of its forms to flow to us when we are receptive, when we are open-handed, when we're open. So non-resistance goes hand in hand with receptivity, with being able to receive. And gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership, right? It's being grateful for something before it's even happened is the ultimate state of receivership. So if you can stay in a vibration of gratitude, which is harmonious with prosperity, which is harmonious with abundance, even being grateful for things that haven't happened yet, you will open the floodgates for all of that good to come to you. If you're in resistance about anything, in resistance to your own good particularly, it's very hard to align yourself with frequency of abundance. Finally, love your enemies or recognize your sacred friends, because this is one of the areas where we can feel internal resistance and sometimes not even really realize it. You know, if you have people in your life that you're blaming somehow or holding hostage in your mind for one thing or another, this creates a block in you. It's not doing anything to them. It's a block in you, and it represents a resistance to your own good. Let that go. To extend a loving thought or a thought of peace or serenity to anyone or anything removes the opposition and the enmity that are creating a dissonance in our own field. You guys, I mean, this stuff, it's never about anybody else. Anything that we hold against anyone is a block in our own energy field. It's nothing to do with, it's nothing to do with them. So, Abraham Lincoln once said, when I make my enemy my friend, have I not destroyed my enemy? So there's no need to destroy our enemies, to take anybody down. We just do that to ourselves in the process. When we make them our friend, even if we can't make them our friend on the level of fact, in reality, in life, if it's a relationship that is never going to work on the level of fact, that doesn't matter. You make them your friend in your mind, in your heart. Consider them what the Dalai Lama called a sacred friend. Sacred friends are the ones who are the hardest to love, the hardest to forgive. Like he said, he considers the Chinese government to be his sacred friend. And the sacred friends are the ones who open our hearts the most, because they teach us how to open our hearts, even when we would rather not, even when we would rather stay closed. And a sacred friend can be another person, or it can be a situation in the world that you're having a really hard time forgiving or letting it be okay, or it could be a condition in your own life, or a condition in your body. Anything like that can be a sacred friend, because it causes you to dig deeper and open your heart and practice non-resistance, allowing things to be as they are, allowing things to simply be as they are, because circumstances are neutral. Circumstances are neutral. And we are the ones who, with our perspective and our judgment of things, deem something to be good or bad, or this is, something I approve of and I like, or this is something I disapprove of and I don't like. That's just us layering our judgments over things, and it really cuts down on our possibilities. Circumstances are neutral, and we can empower ourselves to view any circumstance, any person that's in our life that seems like a challenge, a problem, an obstacle. We can empower ourselves to see anything like that as a way for us to grow and as a way for us to move to a higher level of being. That's the power we have. It's amazing. It really is amazing. And nobody else can do it for us but us. If you start to do that and to practice non-resistance to your daily life. I remember one time I was in my 20s and I was sitting on a public city bus in New York City, going home after an audition or a day of auditions back when I was, young actress in New York City. I was sitting on a bus going home, and I don't know why, but I suddenly became aware that I was sitting on that bus and my whole body was tight. I became aware of it as the bus went around a curve. And suddenly I realized that I had been sitting there tense and tight for probably 20 minutes. And it saddened me, and it also opened up my awareness, because in that moment I realized, why am I so tight? Why am I so tense? What am I resisting? And I realized I was just resisting the flow of life. That's how much fear I had operating unconsciously, was that I had to tighten myself up and armor myself against the flow of life itself. Well, we all do this to a certain degree. Non-resistance ultimately comes down to allowing life to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not proactive. You are proactive. But whatever circumstance you're facing, you understand that it's there to teach you something, that it is there ultimately for your good, and that it's there because the universe has your back, and the universe is showing you a picture so that you can receive that reflection, go inward, and understand, okay, well, what does that tell me about me and the ways that I can grow, the ways that I can open up to a greater good that is constantly trying to reach me. So here are a couple of ways to apply the principle of non-resistance this week in your own life. And like I said, you guys, this stuff only works if you use it. It only works if you do it. So here are some ways. You can ask yourself, what am I resisting? How can I change my focus to the thing that I want to create? Anytime I become aware of resistance. Where in my life right now can I choose to refuse to argue? And notice that it's just my ego that wants to be right. It's just my ego that wants to prove something, to, have the upper hand, or to, have the last word. That's just the ego. I don't need to do that. Right is right, truth is truth. And if I'm in the right, and if I'm aligned with truth, it doesn't need me to defend it anyway. And if I'm not, then that was just my ego wanting to be right anyway. Another question, what can I do to make it easy for prosperity to flow in my life? Where am I resisting my own good? Where am I resisting the flow of prosperity, all the good things that can come to me in life? And finally, to ask yourself, who's a sacred friend in your life? Who is someone that you find it really hard to love? And how can you, just in your own mind and heart, extend love to that person this week? Even if you can't do it in person. Even if it's someone who's not even here on this plane anymore, you can still do it. And with someone that you can actually see or have connection with, how would it change the energy to extend love with no agenda, but to the one to clear the own blockage that you have within your own energy field? So those are the questions that I would encourage you to ask this week. So I'll be back again next week with more spreading the light. And I was supposed to say, I have a page on Facebook. It's Claire Lautier, Life Mastery Consultant. If you like these lessons and you're liking what I'm sharing with you every week, and you want to check that page out and like it, that's awesome. That's great. I also have Instagram. It's Claire Lautier LMC. Claire Lautier LMC. That's my Instagram account. Follow me there because I'm always posting updates, workshops, trainings that I'm offering, free support that I offer, complimentary coaching consultations that I offer, all the kinds of support that I want to extend to you from my heart with love. You can find out more about all those things on my Facebook page and on my Instagram feed. Okay, see you next week. Bye.